Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I'd really appreciate your comment. It helps me understand if you enjoyed the story and how I can improve in future ones. I got the message in the smallest possible way. She set her keys on the counter and didn't look at me. No kiss, no hello, just a careful distance like we were co-workers sharing a break room. I'm Evan Stroud, 33, a project manager for a construction firm in Charlotte. Wednesday nights are my slow nights. Site calls wrapped by 7, spreadsheets closed by 7:30, dinner in the oven by 8. The house smelled like roasted garlic and rosemary. I'd even split a bottle of Barbera we'd been saving, because small rituals hold you together when projects and traffic try to pull you apart. She walked past the table, lifted the wine bottle, read the label like it was a warning, and set it down. I noticed what wasn't on her left hand before I noticed anything else. The band-shaped tan line looked like a lie someone forgot to cover. She said it like a note she'd rehearsed into the mirror. I need a break. No tears. Just a clean sentence laid on the counter next to the keys. The old version of me would have filled the silence with questions. I kept my voice even. From what? She gave me the list I've heard around job site trailers and bar tops for years. Pressure, routine, expectations that feel like a cage. She said she didn't know who she was outside the tasks we'd both turned into a life. I didn't argue. I set 2 plates on the table, slid one toward the empty chair, and watched her decide she wasn't hungry. When she finally sat, she did it edge on, like she was ready to sprint. I let her talk. She had lines ready about personal growth and needing clarity. There were references to friends who took space and came back stronger, and a book I hadn't heard of that says marriages need oxygen. I watched her hands while she delivered the thesis. No ring. Just a steady calm that told me this was a plan. I thought about the last month. Late returns without text, a new lock screen on her phone, the way she started treating weekend time like something she owed to other people. I didn't accuse her of anything. I just marked it in my head the way I mark hairline cracks in concrete. Small now, but pointing somewhere. She pulled the ring out of her purse like she'd remembered to return a borrowed pen. No speech about what it meant. She placed it in my palm face up, diamond catching the kitchen light. Some men would have hurled it, some would have begged. I closed my fingers, not tight, just enough to feel the weight. A break, she said again, and tried to add a smile that didn't make it past her mouth. I looked at the calendar on the wall above the coffee maker. We were 31 days from our 8th anniversary. My first thought was that I'd already put in for the day off. We ate in bites between long stretches of nothing. She talked about a friend's spare room that was open if I need to crash for a few days, and a workshop on self-actualization in Asheville that fell on the perfect weekend. She said she'd still cover her half of the mortgage and utilities. This wasn't a divorce, she said, just air. I nodded the way I nod when a subcontractor tells me he'll be 2 days late, but promises it won't affect the schedule. It always affects the schedule. I told her I heard her. That was all. She wanted pushback and didn't know what to do with the lack of it. The dishes sat in the sink until the water went cold. She lingered in the hallway like she expected permission. I wasn't handing out hall passes. I told her she didn't need to text me her location every hour. She could do what she needed to do. I added that I'd be doing the same. She didn't catch that last part at first. Then she did. I saw it land behind her eyes like a weight she hadn't accounted for. She grabbed a small canvas overnight bag from the closet and tossed in jeans and 2 tops without looking at them. No keepsakes. It made the decision feel bigger than the clothes. When the door closed, the house felt quiet. I stood in the quiet and finished the glass of wine she hadn't touched. Then I rinsed the plates, wiped down the counter, and folded the dish towel. The motions kept my hands moving while my brain lined up tasks like a punch list. Change the Wi-Fi password. Turn off the grocery subscriptions that kept showing up on my card. Snap photos of my documents. Put originals in the lockbox at the office. None of it was revenge. It was inventory. When something shifts under a building, you don't argue about the soil. You reevaluate the load paths. I went into the master and opened the top drawer on my side. Passport, social, birth certificate, into my laptop bag. My grandfather's watch, into the small safe. I was making sure I could walk out if I had to. I plugged my phone into the charger, opened notes, and wrote 3 lines. Call attorney. Remove her as authorized user. Update beneficiaries. Then I opened my messages and typed, if you need anything from the house, text before you come by. I'll make sure I'm not on a call. The tone was polite. The boundary was clear. Sleep didn't come easy, but it came. Somewhere around 2, I woke up and stared at the ceiling fan. When I used to picture catastrophe, I pictured shouting, accusations, dramatic exits. Turns out endings can walk in wearing running shoes and a calm voice. I counted backward from 100. I thought about the first time I noticed the ring on her hand, the first apartment, the time we painted a wall the wrong color and pretended it was intentional. Good memories don't disappear because someone needs a new narrative. They just stop being the whole story. I set an early alarm and beat it by 10 minutes. Coffee, black. Email, short. 2 client updates. Then a change I'd meant to make for a month. Emergency contacts in my HR portal. I removed her and added my brother. Not a statement, just sensible housekeeping. I pulled up a rental site and saved 2 lofts within 8 minutes of the office. I didn't schedule tours. Knowing where the exits are is part of the job. At 7:40, I locked the door and stepped onto the porch. The air had that pre-storm heaviness Carolina gets in spring. I didn't check my phone. At the site, I walked the slab with the superintendent and pretended the rebar grid was the only grid in my life. Measure twice, place once. We flagged a delivery issue and adjusted the poor schedule. I answered 3 calls that weren't hers, sent photos to the client, and kept my day simple. At lunch, I sat in my truck, opened the center console, and slid the ring inside an old sunglasses case. Not out of sight, exactly, out of circulation. I don't keep tools I'm not using on the active cart. I got one text mid-afternoon. We should talk tonight. Just logistics. I typed back. After 8 works. She replied, thanks. There was a time I would have parsed the period. I didn't. I finished my reports, left the site cleaner than I found it, and drove home in the right lane like a man without emergencies. Inside, I set 1 plate and 1 glass on the table and cooked what I'd planned to cook last night. The house didn't argue with me. It just held. When she arrived, she stayed on the porch like crossing the threshold required a new kind of permission. I opened the door and stepped back. She walked to the table and put a folded sheet of paper next to the salt. It was a list of bills with dates and amounts, neat handwriting, like she wanted me to see that she was being reasonable. I thanked her. She looked at the single place setting and almost smiled. Then she caught herself. This is just a break, she said, lighter now, like we were both in on some experiment we'd read about. I nodded once. Got it. I didn't add anything. She waited, but there was nothing to wait for. The chapter had started writing itself the second the ring left her hand. I was just making sure my margins were clean. The morning after the ring landed in my palm, she moved around the kitchen like a tourist who'd extended her stay. My mug was already filled, not the way I take it, just poured and pushed in my direction like a courtesy. She kept her eyes on the window while telling me she might be in and out this week. Lots of plans, lots of catching up to do. I didn't ask with whom. I only said, what does a break look like to you? Timeline, boundaries, and goal. She pretended not to hear the last part and answered the first 2 with airy words about freedom and reflection. When she finished, I repeated it, slower. End goal. She shrugged like weather. That told me everything. By noon, the group chat pings were loud enough to feel like a smoke alarm. Her phone flashed across the counter. Hearts, sparkles, a crown emoji under a photo of a cocktail. New names had pushed old ones to the bottom of the screen. She turned the phone face down when I stepped in for water, then told me she'd be late. The tone was rehearsed, the kind you use when you've practiced not apologizing. I said, text if you won't be home by midnight. Safety, not control. She rolled her eyes and said adults don't have curfews. I agreed and repeated, safety. She left the door half latched behind her, as if the house could decide who it belonged to. Her mother called that evening with the soft voice reserved for hospital corridors. Maybe time apart would help me appreciate her sparkle. I thanked her for caring, asked how her garden was doing, and wished her a good night. I washed the pans and marked the conversation the way I mark a hairline crack, small, directional, instructive. The late returns started like weather fronts and hardened into a pattern. 1 a.m. with bar air clinging to her hair. 2 a.m. with the shy perfume she never wore for me. She'd drop her heels in the hall and linger like a border guard waiting for a passport. I didn't interrogate. I moved my laptop and gave her the couch. The first time I didn't ask, she looked disappointed. The second time, annoyed. The third, she tried for a fight. You're not even curious where I've been. I met her eyes and kept my voice level. Not curious enough to compete with your answers. She blinked, then laughed too loud. She printed an article and left it on the dining table. 7 rules for a conscious break. Highlighter, underlines, a box around a sentence about not pressuring outcomes. The paper was supposed to be law. I read it once, folded it twice, and slid it into the bills tray. That night, during the sort of conversation that thinks it's important because it's long, she said the break was already helping her breathe. I said, good. Breathing is non-negotiable. Then I asked calmly, is there someone else? She went still, like a deer who smelled asphalt. That question comes from insecurity, she said, reciting the article without realizing it. It comes from courtesy, I said. A heads up lets us both be adults. She didn't say no. She said I was making it weird. Her friends began doing what friends do when they smell blood in marriage water. They did outreach disguised as concern. One texted that I should give her the romance she's craving. Another sent a podcast about masculine vulnerability with a timestamp for the part she thought I needed. I answered both with the same sentence. Thanks for thinking of me. I didn't forward the messages or show them to her. I was watching a weather map and noting the prevailing winds. On Friday, we had dinner with 2 couples who didn't know yet. She announced the break between the salad and the entrees like it was a job update. Nobody looked at me, which is the kindest rudeness people can manage. She framed it as mutual, because stories sell better without a villain. I let the lie pass, and when there was a gap in the hum, I spoke once. For clarity, I said, steady, I'm not on hold. If you need space, take it. But we're not running parallel lives under the same roof forever. The table went polite quiet. She squeezed her napkin, then called me rigid with a smile that invited the others to laugh. I finished my steak and boxed the rest like a man packing tools after a job that doesn't need him. The next day, she announced a workshop in Asheville and called it the perfect reset. I said, I hope it's worth the drive. She stared, weighing whether that was sarcasm. It wasn't. She left a schedule on the counter with circles around the hours she'd be unavailable. I circled nothing and went about my day. At dusk, she texted a selfie in front of a mural I'd seen on realtors' postcards. She looked younger, which is what distance does when a camera is between you and the truth. I wrote back, drive safe. She sent a heart reaction that felt like a receipt. Sunday afternoon, she came back with merch, tote bag, water bottle, a vocabulary of light. She was measuring my reaction. I gave her none. In the evening, she brought up ground rules and delivered a list. No questions about plans. When she finished, I said, my only rule is that respect doesn't go on sabbatical. She asked what that meant. It means no contempt in my house, I said, even if you're only visiting. She let out a short laugh and told me I take phrases too literally. Maybe. Words build the world you have to live in. A midweek happy hour became a string of weeknights with names attached. Colleagues, an old classmate, a friend from a running group that has never run. She started sending photos of charcuterie boards to our shared cloud, as if proof of food was proof of innocence. The ring's tan line faded. The certainty in her tone grew. I matched it with quiet completion of my days. Work, gym, home. I was living inside of it. When she asked if I wanted to watch a show like Old Times, I said no, not unkindly. Old times need old terms, I added. She pretended not to understand. The closest we came to an argument happened over a simple ask. She texted at 11:58 p.m. Can you leave the chain off the door? I might be late. I replied, use your key. Chain will be on after midnight. She came in at 12:37, found the chain, and knocked like a stranger. I got up, slid it back, and stepped aside. She said I was being punitive. I said I was being a man who sleeps. I'm not trying to control you, I added. I'm running my house like I still live here. The conversation didn't escalate because I refused to climb it. She went to the guest room and made a lot of drawer noises. The door clicked, quiet and definitive. A small thing broke the next morning. One of the bowls from our first apartment slipped from her hand and died on the tile. She said, oops, with a tone I recognized from people who've grown used to being forgiven. I swept up the pieces and set the broom back on the hook we installed together. We should talk, I said. She gestured for me to go first. What's the plan? I asked. If 6 weeks from now you're still breathing easier? She didn't answer. I tried again. What are you building here? A pause that returns us, or a runway to somewhere else? She said, very carefully, that she needed to see how she feels. So no plan, I said. Just drift. She called that flow. I nodded once. Then understand that I won't be standing in place to measure it. By the end of that week, the house had learned our new choreography. 2 sets of footsteps, different rhythms, minimal overlap. She upped the tests, left the ring in the fruit bowl, came home with a story about a guy who gets her humor, asked if I was jealous. I said no, I'm listening. The words didn't give her a handle to turn. She looked past me, toward the door, and smiled at something I couldn't see. I did the simplest thing I'd done since this started. I took the ring from the bowl and put it in the same sunglasses case in the truck's console. Not hidden, just stored where idle tools go. The pressure she'd counted on, accusations, pleading, performative pain, never showed up. In its place was an evenness she didn't recognize. That was the escalation she hadn't planned for. She wanted a break that kept me orbiting. What she got was gravity winding down. I didn't argue when she said she needed a break. I rinsed my glass, set it in the rack, and let the dishwasher hum to life. That sound, the low, even churn, felt like the only honest noise in the house. For months, everything else had been theater, tests, ultimatums, teary epiphanies that evaporated the next morning. That night, I stopped auditioning. I went to my desk and made a list with 3 columns. What's mine, what's shared, what I'll return. If she wanted space, I would give her a map, a calendar, and receipts. I moved my direct deposit to a solo account, turned off the auto transfers that fattened our joint savings, and removed an authorized user whose definition of partnership had drifted into subscription. I canceled 3 streaming services and left a note with the passwords to the ones I kept. Use until the month ends. Then it's yours if you want it. Next came the paperwork I'd avoided because I thought we'd fix things. An email to a family lawyer recommended by my mentor, a message to our therapist saying I wouldn't be attending sessions designed to grade my reactions, and a request to the bank for itemized statements for the last 6 months. Not to accuse, just to know. Games thrive in fog. I was switching on the lights. In the bedroom, I filled 2 duffels. Not a single thing of hers went in. Every shirt folded. Every book spined out. I left the wedding photo on the dresser and slipped off my ring, set it beside the frame, and wrote 1 line on a yellow sticky. This symbol deserves sincerity. I took the guest room that night, not to punish, but because sharing a bed had become performance art. Applause had been replaced by eye rolls. She knocked around midnight. We can talk tomorrow, she said, performing softness. I nodded. Tomorrow, I agreed, and closed the door. In the quiet, I realized I wasn't angry. Anger implies you still expect something. I felt still, like a lake after wind moves on. Morning was logistics. I made 2 coffees and slid one across the island. I heard you, I said. So here's how your break works in practice. I laid out the plan like a project manager. Finances temporarily decoupled, a schedule for splitting bills, a shared calendar for who'd be at the house when, no midnight interrogations, no last-minute tests. She blinked, surprised the break had boundaries. She wanted open-ended theater. She got policies. She tried on outrage, then concern, then charm. Each slid off the surface. You're overreacting, she decided. I'm reacting exactly once, I said. And then I'm done. That afternoon, I moved tools, files, the watch my father left me, and a shoebox of childhood photos to a small storage unit. I kept the key on a plain steel ring that didn't bite my skin. Back home, I cooked a simple dinner for 1 and ate at the table without checking the doorway. There is a difference between being alone and being a prop. I had chosen the better loneliness. The lawyer called the next day. We can draft a separation agreement that converts cleanly to divorce if needed, he said. Needed. A tidy word for a heavy door. Make it respectful, I told him. I'm not here to win. I'm here to end the game. He laughed softly, not unkindly. That's how people actually win. By Thursday, the papers were in a manila envelope on the counter. She came home late, saw her name through the brass clasp, and froze. What is this? Clarity, I said. She opened the envelope like it might hiss. The first pages were practical. Dates, accounts, who keeps which car, who takes which debt. She skimmed until the word dissolution landed like a gavel. You're divorcing me because I asked for a break? I'm divorcing the version of us where I audition daily for your approval, I said. If you want a partner, you choose one. If you want a stage, you'll need a different actor. She tried to rerun scenes that used to work. The apology that I assent. The kiss that erases. The threat that tethers. My silence didn't feed them. I poured myself water and returned to my chair. You can sign, contest, or propose amendments, I said. Whatever you choose, I'll respect. What I won't do is play. The next morning I met with HR to separate benefits cleanly, then visited a credit union to open a card with a modest limit. I was building a smaller, truer life. On the way home, I bought a single lamp for the guest room and a plant that would live if I forgot it for a week. Freedom can look like emptiness at first. It's just unused space. Friends asked what happened. I told them the truth without color. I kept explaining, then she kept testing. I stopped. My sister cried anyway, then laughed at herself, then pressed a Tupperware of lasagna into my hands like an oath. Eat, she said, and don't text her at midnight. I didn't. When the weekend came, I packed 3 boxes of books, 2 of kitchen gear, and 1 of things that can break me if I look too long. I labeled that last one simply, later. I loaded the truck while she stood in the doorway with crossed arms and an expression I finally decoded as disbelief that the show had closed. Where are you even going? She asked. To a lease with month-to-month options, I said. To nights where my worth isn't graded. To mornings that don't start with a test. What if I don't sign? She pushed. Then we do it the long way, I said. I won't be cruel. I also won't be here. I left the key on a small, flat stone on the porch. The first stone we'd carried home from a hike years ago when we were still collecting souvenirs instead of grievances. I paused, not for her, but for the man who had begged for scraps of certainty. I told him, quietly, you're allowed to stop trying to be chosen. At the new place, the lock turned with that bright, blank click only new locks have. I set the plant on the sill, the lamp on a crate, and the ring in a drawer. I texted her once, I won't block you. I also won't play. Use email for anything logistical. Then I put my phone face down. In the days that followed, she cycled through the weather of regret. Sun, storm, sudden hail. I answered only to logistics. My sentences became clean, declarative things that could stand upright without props. Yes, the electric bill is paid. No, I won't discuss us over wine. The dog's vet records are in the blue folder. I kept my voice level, my schedule steady, my miles measured. People imagined the dramatic break, the doors slamming. Mine sounded like paper sliding into a file, like a lamp turning off at 10, like a pan cooling on a stove. One night, I fell asleep mid-chapter and woke to the light still on and the book open on my chest. It felt like living, not waiting. On the 7th day, she emailed. I signed. No story about who made her do it. I replied with a scan of my signature and instructions for the next steps. Then I closed the laptop and stood at the window long enough to watch the streetlights blink awake. I didn't feel victorious. I felt accurate. Maybe there is a version of us in some other life where we both learned sooner. But this one is mine, and it no longer requires auditions. I didn't slam a door. I walked through it. I didn't win an argument. I ended a game. I'm done playing. The first week after I left, she stayed quiet. No calls or texts beyond the purely logistical. I could feel her testing the waters, hoping my silence was a bluff. But a bluff has the intention of being called. This wasn't that. On the 8th day, the tone shifted. A short text arrived. Hope you're okay. Not a question. A breadcrumb. I didn't touch it. The next day, she sent a meme we would have laughed at months ago. I didn't reply to that either. That's when the calls began, 2 in a single evening, both ignored. By week 2, she showed up at my new place without warning. She had on the sweater I once told her was my favorite, makeup done like the nights we'd go out just to wander the city. She stood in the doorway smiling like she expected me to melt. I let her stand there a full minute before I stepped aside and said, 5 minutes. She made small talk, circling the point. Asked about the plant on the sill. Commented on the new lamp. When the silence pressed in, she finally blurted, it doesn't have to be like this. I kept my voice steady. It already is. Her eyes flickered. Not hurt, but disbelief that I meant it. That night, the messages turned sharp. Accusations replaced breadcrumbs. You didn't even try. You're throwing everything away. Week 3, she reached for nostalgia. Photos of trips. A video of us dancing in the kitchen. I archived them without opening. When she realized the past wasn't bait enough, she tried guilt. A mutual friend messaged me. She's saying you've changed. I told him the truth. I have. That's the point. Then came the panic moves. Her car happened to be in the parking lot near my work 2 days in a row. She left a bag of my old t-shirts on my porch, shirts I'd left behind intentionally. Each gesture was a mix of reach and control, a way to see if she still had access to me. I stayed unshaken. It wasn't until she heard through mutual friends that I'd been spending my weekends out, not bars, just hikes, coffee shops, small trips, that the facade cracked. She called 3 times in a row one Saturday morning. When I answered on the 4th, her voice was tight. "Are you seeing someone?" "No," I said. "I'm just not waiting anymore." Silence. Then the soft, almost stunned reply. "You're really done, aren't you?" "I was done the night you called it a break," I told her. "You just didn't see it yet." She started to cry then, not the dramatic kind meant to pull me back, but the quiet, uneven kind of someone realizing the script has been thrown out. For a second, I almost softened. But pity isn't the same as love, and I wasn't about to mistake the two. After that, the messages thinned. Fewer attempts, longer gaps. Her friends stopped reaching out, probably realizing they couldn't spin a story when I wasn't giving them lines to work with. Even her mother's calls stopped. The silence felt like a clean room after months of stale air. The last move she made was a letter, handwritten, left in my mailbox. It was full of what-ifs. Could we still, maybe some days? I read it once, folded it neatly, and put it in the same box I'd labeled later. Not for revisiting, just for keeping in case I ever doubted why I left. Because the truth was, she wanted back the version of me who'd keep playing her game. And that man was gone. By the time the signed divorce papers came back, there was nothing left in me that felt raw. No jagged edges. Just a steady, even quiet, the kind that comes when you've been walking uphill for miles and suddenly realize you're on level ground. The lawyer's email was brief, fully executed. "You're officially divorced." I read it twice, because I wanted the reality to settle in. I closed the laptop, stood up, and made coffee like it was any other morning. In a way, it was. The difference was, this morning belonged entirely to me. I didn't post anything. People who matter already knew, and people who don't will hear whatever version of the story she tells them. That's fine. I don't need the record to be straight everywhere, just in my own head. She sent one last message a week later. "I hope you find what you're looking for." It was the kind of thing you say when you've realized the door really is locked from the other side. I left it unanswered. Some words are better left suspended in the air where they lose their weight. My place doesn't have much yet. A bed, a desk, a couch I picked up secondhand. But every item in it was chosen, not carried over by default. I buy food I actually want to eat. I leave the lamp on as long as I like. The silence is no longer tense. It's space. Friends still ask how it ended. I tell them, she wanted a break. I wanted a life. That's the shortest, truest version. It gets a nod from the men who've been there and a puzzled look from the ones who haven't. Both are fine. One night, I saw her at a grocery store. She was in line ahead of me, wearing that same sweater she showed up in the day she came to my apartment. We made brief eye contact. She gave a small smile. I nodded once and turned back to the self-checkout. We were 2 people buying groceries, nothing more. On the drive home, I realized that was the real closure. Not the papers, not the moving out. The moment I could see her without feeling the pull to re-enter the game. It's strange how freedom feels less like fireworks and more like a steady hum you don't want to turn off. I've stopped measuring my worth in how much I can absorb or how long I can endure. The man who used to take pride in pushing through now takes pride in walking away before the damage sets in. That's not bitterness. That's clarity. If there's any lesson in all this, it's that love without respect is just a slow erosion. You don't notice the ground disappearing under you until you look up and realize you're standing on a ledge. The only way forward is to step off, not into a fall, but onto solid ground you chose yourself. She may tell the story as me giving up too soon. She may say I wasn't willing to fight for it. That's fine. She can own that version. The truth is, I fought for years. I just stopped fighting for someone who wouldn't stand in the ring with me. Now, my mornings start with quiet coffee and no negotiations. My evenings end without the dread of what mood might be waiting behind the door. The game is over because I refuse to keep playing. And that's the point. Respect isn't something you bargain for, plead for, or try to earn with enough good behavior. It's the baseline. Without it, there's no partnership, only performance. I don't perform anymore. In the end, I left so I could live without regretting myself.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.